is something you would never believe unless you read it. But you also have to understand the mindset of the government that requested it. And that is one of the most important features of this video. The objective was to determine accurately and realistically the nature of the problems that would confront the United States if and when a condition of permanent peace should arrive. This is one of the key elements of the report, because we are to go under the Antichrist system, an era of supposed peace. And this is what this whole program was about. If and when a condition of permanent peace should arise, that means that peace in reality equals world socialism, as we will find out as we journey through this report. And they were to draft a program for dealing with this contingency. In other words, this is a planned situation. If we move to an era of peace, and not only just America, but the whole world at large. In 1961, Public Law 87-297 was passed, paving the way for the United States to be merged with the United Nations. It's a very crucial law in that it disarms the American citizen in violation of the clear intent of the Constitution, which calls for our right to bear arms to maintain our free state. And by the calling for the disarming of all Americans, of course, we lose our free state and we are submerged, actually, into a slave state. The disarming was to be done by a period of gradual disarmament, and as they were disarming, the United Nations would be built up with a powerful standing army. The evidence suggests a CFR-TC Bilderberg connection, the rich men of the earth, the merchants of Babylon, the killers of the just, according to the Holy Scriptures, to provide a true world government through the adoption of a world government constitution. It was a clear intent to place the United States directly under the United Nations and to scrap our Constitution. Universal peace is a prerequisite for the pursuit of that goal, and from the competitive anarchy of nation states, therefore the age of nations must end, and the era of humanity must begin. You will find there's a constant call for the merging of all humanity. Here's a resolution adopted in the United Nations. This is what it says: regulation, limitation, and balanced reduction of all armed forces and all armaments. The United Nations. You'll find that as the United States and the Russian military are to be reduced, the UN is consistently brought up to a higher and higher position. The only thing we are left with are internal security forces. Under the Freedom from War, this is a packet issued by the federal government to go along with 87-297. This can only be achieved, the merging and disarmament, through the progressive strengthening of international institutions under the United Nations and by creating a United Nations peace force. See, they want to progressively strengthen the international institutions, all of which come under the United Nations. We are to lose our sovereignty. This can only be achieved through armed forces and a prohibition of their reestablishment in any form whatsoever other than those required to preserve internal order and for contributions to a United Nations peace force. They are to bring the UN up to a point where no state would have the military power to challenge the progressively to circumvent the Constitution of the United States. And in reality, it's a document of treason of how the rich men of the earth are actually going to divert the attentions of the people away so that they can get this done. The guidelines given by the government for the Iron Mountain Report: 1, military-style objectivity; 2, avoidance of any value assumptions; and 3, the inclusion of all relevant data. And this is a very important part of this report, is the avoidance of all value assumptions. This is what makes it so absolutely cold and inhuman. It is to be amoral. It is as a computer is amoral. It deals in factual data. There is not any mercy. There's not any compassion. It doesn't deal in right or wrong, or what is good or evil. It is a report on the handling of men, women, children, and babies on the basis of herd or animal management without regard to any moral considerations whatsoever. It reduces people to objects. It reduces all humans to non-entities with no rights of self-determination, with no rights granted by the Creator, and with absolutely no rights under a Constitution. The Constitution has been effectively canceled by Iron Mountain. Now again, you'll find these resolutions coming up in Congress all the time that want to strengthen the United Nations, to establish an international criminal court, SJ 32. These are bills before the Congress and the Senate. The implementation of Agenda 21 and other Earth Summit agreements, which is all United Nations. Reagan called for the World Army. Clinton has approved a UN Army. You're seeing it on TV all the time. War is required, the glue of the nations, according to the Iron Mountain Report. Is war the scourge of the nations? It is said that war is merely an extension of diplomacy by other means. It is also said that war is necessary waste. But what is war? And why do peoples of the earth continuously fight and die? Why do millions of human families have a member or members that they have lost to this thing called war? What is the reality behind war? Does man have to fight wars, or can he develop a system of peace? And would the development of peace be worse than war itself? It was ordered by the rich men of the earth. Therefore, they themselves must be the ones waging the wars, and now they have elected not to wage wars, but have elected to do something else, because warfare is drawing to a close. It will have soon served its purpose. In other words, it is a deliberate effort to bring in another system, for the first system of war has almost accomplished the goals originally intended. Albert Pike was purported to have written a letter in which he outlines 3 world wars. Each had a specific purpose and each had a goal. The last war, World War III, was to be fought to bring in an era of peace under Lucifer. It was to be fought predominantly between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it would come in an era of seeming peace when it seemed like everything was fine, everything was great. What should we be prepared to do about it? What, for instance, are the real functions of war in modern societies? This report is asking about is what about peace? It is surely no exaggeration to say that conditions of world peace would lead to changes in the social structure of the nations. These changes would be of unparalleled and revolutionary magnitude. As we would transition then from an era of war into peace, what would be the problems? It is an incorrect assumption that war as an institution is subordinate to the social system it is believed to serve. What they're saying here is that nations wage war for reasons other than what they state. War itself is a basic social system. within which others are secondary modes of organization, conflict, or conspire. In other words, war itself is the basic social system of mankind. And if we go to peace, we're going to have problems unless we understand that. It is the system which has governed most human societies on record today. Well, this is, of course, very true in our day and age. We have seen nothing but war, starting predominantly with World War I and coming forward. The Soviet Union has had tremendous expenditures in their military, and the United States has likewise. It's been, in reality, an arms race. We're going to find out there is a reason for it. The capacity of a nation to make war is the greatest social power it can exercise. War making, active or contemplated, is a matter of life and death, says Iron Mountain. The misconceptions of war: 1, to defend a military, or defend a nation rather, from military attack by another, or to deter such attack. To defend the national interest, economic, political, or ideological. To maintain or increase a nation's military power for its own sake. Now you see, these are the visible or more obvious reasons why a person would say, well, that's why we have war. Part of the entire Iron Mountain report. Its conclusion was that war is absolutely necessary. It's an absolute requirement for human societies and nations to come together. It is in reality, they claim, the glue of the nation. Right? Iron Mountain says it is these invisible or implied functions that are the dominant forces in our society. So what we have to find out then is what are the true functions of war in a society. Economic reasons are: it is a necessary waste that operates outside the normal economic supply and demand system. Warfare creates an artificial demand. In other words, the war system itself, having huge militaries with all of their armaments, with all of the research and developments, creates a demand. This waste of money outside the system, according to Iron Mountain, acts as a counterbalance to the economic growth of the nation. It is progressive for research and development of weapon systems, and it spurs technological advances which spin off and help society at large. Defense spending per se might be countenanced on economic grounds alone as a stimulator of the national metabolism. In other words, war itself, for economic purposes, is a tremendous growth factor. For the political reasons, it's different. A nation is a group of people organized together with a common goal and a national identity. The nation has an outlook or an attitude of how it will deal with other nations, and that's what we call foreign policy. A nation's foreign policy, says Iron Mountain, can have no substitute if it lacks, or no substance rather, if it lacks the means of enforcing its attitude. Is itself the defining element of any nation's existence vis-a-vis any other nation. War, then, equals nations because it is the glue of nations and what causes them to come together, and peace would mean the dissolving of the nations. The elimination of war implies the elimination of national sovereignty and the traditional nation state. Please understand the importance of that remark in Iron Mountain. It is the elimination of war that brings us to world government. The war system not only has been essential to the existence of nations as independent political entities, but has been equally indispensable to their stable internal development. Without it, the war system, no government has ever been able to obtain its legitimacy, or in other words, we could say its right to rule its society. War is the basis of that claim to rule, and it is therefore the glue that holds a nation together, according to Iron Mountain. The possibility of war provides a sense of external necessity without which no government can remain in power. The organization of a society for the possibility of war is its principal political stabilizer. All right? In other words, for the Soviet Union, they said that the American people were the enemy. And that gave them the glue which held the Soviet Empire together, which rallied the people to make such sacrifices so that we could build up this huge war machine. The basic authority of the modern state over its people resides in its war powers. Now that's another very important statement. Therefore, a substitute for the war system must be found in order to control the people and provide stability and legitimacy of government if we go into an era of peace. Now we know that the United Nations is to be that era of peace. So therefore what they are saying is we have to find substitutes for what war does, the invisible functions of war. The war machine is discarded, new political machinery would be needed at once. In other words, as they phase war out, they have to phase whatever they're going to put in its place in to control the people, to control the nation. This is an essential part of Iron Mountain. Until it, the substitute for war, is developed, the continuance of the war system must be assured to maintain the stability of its internal organization of power. In other words, we have to keep the war system going in order to remain in control. Keep war until all substitutes are in place and running so we don't lose our rulership or societies. What substitutes for war are there? Well, it has to be a universal threat of equal magnitude as that of World War. The immediate loss of life and the immediate thought that blood is going to be shed. It has to be credible, and it must be accepted by the vast majority of the population of any given nation, or in reality, the whole world, if they're going to bring in global peace. Credibility, in fact, says Iron Mountain, lies at the heart of the problem of developing a political substitute for war. We must emphasize that one must be found of credible quality and magnitude if a transition to peace is to ever come about without social disintegration. In other words, really what they're saying is a nation would self-destruct without an external threat of some type. It is more probable in our judgment that such a threat will have to be invented rather than developed from some unknown conditions. That means exactly what it says. They're going to invent a system to accomplish this.